Welcome to our presentation on JEPD Apocalypse, the end of the documentary hypothesis. I'm Gioacchino Michael Cascione, author of Repetition in the Bible, and this book is available through these sources. This is a dramatic visual demonstration exposing the academic hoax of the Bible's origin known as JEPD, or the documentary hypothesis. In the past 150 years, scholars have created their own mythology, like Paul Bunyan or Santa Claus, about how the Bible was written. We're going to take a look at what is actually in the text in regard to this supposed hypothesis. The hoax is that 4 tribal sources invented by scholars are credited with the origin of the Bible. They are known as Yahwehs. Now, they invented these names. Yahwehs, 950 BC. That's their determination. Elohis, 850 BC. Deuteronomus, 600 BC. Priestly Code, 500 BC. None of these names or dates can be verified. It's all theory. They're just putting it together as they imagine it to be. These invented sources were supposedly put together into one book or document by Redactor X. They turned the Bible into 4 suits of cards shuffled into one deck or shuffled into one text by Redactor X, and they call this the documentary hypothesis. The imaginary 4 sources of JEPD and Redactor X are color-coded like you're seeing here on the screen. So there is no J, but here we have in Hebrew, but they're calling it Yahweh, so that's J. Elohis, E. P is priestly. Deuteronomus, D. They had to invent a second Deuteronomus because they found that, well, maybe that's more than we thought, so now they have 2 sets of Deuteronomists, but they still kept it JEPD. And then there's Redactor X and other over here. That's that color there. That's for somebody who just seems to waltz through the text every now and then. We don't know where it came from, but that must be other, since it doesn't fit our theory. That's the whole presentation of the documentary hypothesis. And then there's the Friedman error. Now, in his book, Who Wrote the Bible, published first in 1987, Friedman offers a complete division of the documentary hypothesis. In the back of the book, he lists a division of all the verses accredited to each of these different sources in a breakdown. And he says, well, this part was written by Yahweh, this part written by Elohis, and so forth. Sometimes he makes a mistake, and so we're coloring that section of his mistake with this color here, and there's information about his very well-known book, Who Wrote the Bible, by Richard Elliott Friedman. Now, color-coding JEPD in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers makes the Bible look like a giant UPC code on a Campbell's soup can. And here you see how it would look if you splice it all together, all the little sections of all the different writers, all spliced together, and what is now supposedly the origin of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. These are the color codes, and this is what they say it really looks like if you color code it. This is absolute nonsense. But this is taught in every major university in the world on the origin of the Bible, particularly the most well-known universities. There's another theory put forth by the brilliant Florentine rabbi Umberto Cassuto, 1883 to 1951. He died in Israel in 1951. Cassuto's commentaries prove that the Bible was written with numerous phrases dispersed in the text in repetitions of 7s, 10s, and 12s. Cassuto's evidence leads to a conclusion that we can really never know how the Bible was put together. You'll have to look at the evidence and decide for yourself. If the documentary hypothesis is correct, these phrases repeating in multiples of 7, 10, or 12 repetitions, according to Cassuto, should appear in the same color according to JEPD and Redactor X. The two theories will now be compared, beginning with heptadic, that's multiples of 7, or heptadic meter, repetition in sevens. Here's our first. Bless them appears exactly 7 times in Genesis. God bless them. See, here you see all the repetitions. Genesis 1:22, 1:28, 5:2, 31:5, 48:20, 49:28, 49:28. Vaybarak Otem Elohim. There you see the Hebrew compared with the English translation exactly 7 times. Somehow or other, according to the document hypothesis, this repetition of 7, the first 2 are supposedly written by the priestly code, and then the redacted one, then the Elohist 2, and then the redacted 2 more. How is this possible that this group, separated by centuries and hundreds of miles, could all be writing with the same wording and then keep the heptadic meter in the same document? Here we are, another one. Over the face of all the earth. 7 times in Genesis. Genesis 1:29, 7:3, 8:9, 11:4, 11:8, 11:9, 41:56. Al Panei Kal Haaretz. Over the face of all the earth. Look at the color separation here. This phrase is supposedly written by the priestly code, this by the Yahwist, and this by the Elohist. Look how they coordinated. Now, if they're coordinating to write this phrase exactly 7 times, how is this possible with that separation of geography and centuries? Well, the reality is there is no such thing as JEPD. It never existed. Not if there's repetition in the text. We have many more to show. The children of Israel, 7 times. B'nai Israel. There they are, 7 times in Genesis. Genesis 32:2, I should say Genesis 32:32, 36:31, 42:5, 45:21, 46:5, 46:8, 50:25, and again, Israel, who is also really Jacob, he's identified as Israel exactly 7 times in the book of Genesis. Here they are again. Notice Elohis, Yahwist, Elohis. How are they keeping track of this meter? Well, the reality is that the originators of the documentary hypothesis had no idea that there was meter in the text and that they were breaking it up right through the meter, which means the whole process is flawed. The land of Goshen, exactly 7 times. Solid color. Every now and then, by chance, they'll find that you'll have a solid color. Here, every one of these 7 is supposedly written by the Yahwist, if there were such a thing. And here they have them all 7. That means each group is writing in 7s, and then they're all writing in 7s together. And then some are writing the 7s together, others are not part of that. That's what we're supposed to believe when you see this separation, according to Friedman's division of the text in the documentary hypothesis. I am the Lord thy God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. There's a nice long phrase. Exactly 7 times. First 6 by the priestly code. The last one, the deuterist. He must have known that there were 6 before him, so he decides to add the 7th. That's what we have to assume, according to this ridiculous theory of the documentary hypothesis. Of course, the other reality is, that all 7 were written by the same individual. And there is no such thing as the documentary hypothesis. Scholars appear to be incapable of understanding the text. How can they miss this kind of repetition in the text all these years and come up with this bizarre philosophy and theory, this myth they've created about the documentary hypothesis in Yale, Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, Princeton? This is what they teach. The Pharaoh said to Joseph, exactly 7 times, 5 with the Elohists and 2 with the Yahwists. and answered and said. 7 times. We always supply the Hebrew for those who are checking to see if we're quoting it correctly. To my Lord, 7 times. And he said to him, 7 times in Genesis. That's God speaking. God says this phrase 7 times. And he said to him, and here we have 3 with the Yahwehs, 2 with the Elohis, 2 with the priestly code. Utter nonsense. Murmur against 7 times. In the book of Exodus, 7 times in the book of Exodus, we see that phrase that the children of Israel are murmuring against. And here we have it, all 7 of them in Exodus, 3 different colors, supposedly 3 different sets of authors to write that. The service of the tent of meeting. Now, in the documentary hypothesis, anything that is about the service of the tabernacle or how they're worshiping or their worship practice is written by, they say, by the priestly code. Well, with that in mind, then anything about the tabernacle would necessarily appear in meter as well. And so here we have it, 7 times, the service of the tent meeting. Over the earth, exactly 7 times. This is the beginning of Genesis. 7 times in Genesis chapter 1, the phrase, Al Haaretz, over the earth. A feast to or of the Lord 7 times, as it appears right here in Exodus and Leviticus, the last one in Numbers. The redactor put in 3, the entire documentary hypothesis would claim. Again, more nonsense. This is the JEPD graveyard of dead scholarship. A stiff-necked people. Good phrase to follow the last slide we showed here. A stiff-necked people. Exodus, 3 from Deuteronomy. Notice this fellow here, that's that blue color. That's the other. He kind of waltzes through the text and adds 3 more to finish off the meter that the Elohist and the Yahwist wrote, and then other comes in and adds 3 more. Lift up eyes. This is a double 7. That's double heptadic meter. 14 times. Here's the Hebrew. In the eyes of, again, 14 times. But with my Lord or Lord, another 7 inside the 7. So we have 14, and 7 of the 14 have this in front of it, a double heptadic meter. Supposedly assembled by Yahwist, Elohist, priestly code, and so forth. Now, under the charade of scholarship, university departments of biblical studies have become the purveyors of superstition, fakery, and fiction. University administrators should defund this academic farce that is perpetrated in the name of scholarship. We will now examine Cassuto's theory of decatometer. That's repetition of 10s. Remember, we said before, repetition of 7s, 10s, and 12s. Now we'll look at 10s, or decatometer. Fowl of the air, 10 times. Interesting, we have 4 in the first chapter, and 5 more here, supposedly by the Yahwist, and then another one by the priestly code here in Genesis 9:2. Mount Sinai appears in Exodus. The phrase Mount Sinai shows up exactly 10 times in the book of Exodus. Pillar of the cloud, the entire Pentateuch appears exactly 10 times. And it came to pass 10 times in Genesis. And God saw 10 times in the Pentateuch. This right here this color here, if you recall in Genesis 6:12, that's the freedman error. He doesn't say where that came from. It's not listed. All the firstborn, Exodus 10 times in the book of Exodus, all the firstborn. The Ark of Testimony, 10 times. It shall be the statute forever throughout your generations, 10 times in the Pentateuch. Notice how the redactor supposedly just came through with this long phrase, and then he decided to add 2 more to round it off at 10. That's what you have to believe if you're going to believe the documentary hypothesis in Leviticus 3:17, 6:18, 10:9, 23:14, 23:31, 23:41. I should say that's 23:31, 23:41, 24:3, and then Numbers 10:8, and down here 15:15 and 18:23. Look at the length of that phrase, appearing exactly 10 times in the book, in the entire Pentateuch. Shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until even. There's a long phrase, exactly 10 times. In the land of Canaan, 20 times appears in Genesis. Looks kind of like rainbow colors. All these writers all writing the same phrase and then coming up with 20. From the land of Egypt, 50 times. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, exactly 70 times in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, 70 times. Universities ignore the work of Hebrew scholar Umberto Cassuto and follow the research of fake Lutheran scholar Julius Wellhausen and his 19th century voodoo academics called the documentary hypothesis. Take a look at the faculties here who promote this in Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Oxford. Tablets of stone, 12 times. 2 tablets of stone, 10 times. Now we're looking at dodecadal, or meter in 12 repetitions. Now this is particularly interesting. So I have 2 tablets of stone, 10 times, and then 2 more without the word 2 in it. So I have a 2 and a 12, I should say a 2 and a 10 for a 12 put together here, or a 12 and 10. And now here we see we have 2 in Exodus, I should say 5 in Exodus, and then 7 more in Deuteronomy. There's the Hebrew. All flesh, 12 times. There's this color of Genesis 6, 12, 13, 17, and 19 that is missing from Friedman's division of the text. And then there are the others here to make up a complete 12. Orphan and widow, singular, 12 times in the Pentateuch. Again, we've got the Elohists, Deuteronomists, and then other in Deuteronomy. Whoever this guy is, he just kind of waltzes through other, and then we're back to this Deuteronomist again here. Maybe he's a brother-in-law, just shows up every now and then and throws his ideas in the text for the Deuteronomist. Who knows what the documentary hypothesis is thinking to come up with this, but here it is 12 times. 6 times, or I should say 6 days, that phrase 6 days appears 12 times in the Pentateuch. Here it is 6 days, 12 times. Quite a spread here on the contributions. On the tabernacle, 12 times in the Pentateuch. Notice how the redactor supposedly added 5 more to make this a nice set of 12. The anger of the Lord, 12 times. The anger of the Lord kindled 10 times. The anger of the Lord was kindled 7 times. Here we have all 3 meters combined in the same set. That happens quite often, by the way. We're only showing a small part of the data. Look at the length of this and the repetition of this phrase and the distribution of colors. 2 sets of Deuteronomous. There is no such thing as the documentary hypothesis. What the truth is the text is written in meter. From on the face of the earth, 12 times. 7 years, 12 times. And all the people, amen, 12 times, and said all the people, amen, 10 times. Now, for those who read Hebrew, take a look at this section right here in Hebrew. At the end, here's the final psalmic. There's 11 of them. The 12th one is a pay, which means these phrases were written so that the 12th one would be a pay. That means that the writer was keenly aware they were writing in meter, and it also means that the psalmics and the pays that we see there are part of the original text. In all the land of Egypt, 12 times. The presence of meter in the text, this indicates that only one author could possibly have placed the meter in the text. It could not be the work of 4 different separate groups or writers separated by more than a century and geography collated by the redactor. This data gathered here by following the methodology established by Umberto Cassuto with the aid of BibleWorks software was assembled for you. That's how we made this presentation. And as I said, there is far more than this available. And you're invited to take a look in this book, Repetition of the Bible, by myself, Gioacchino Michael Cascione, edited by David Kuski, Robert Dargitz, and Ralph Price. So thank you for the opportunity to present this material and to verify that we have in the text absolute proof that this text is written not by 4 authors or 5 or 6, however many they want to imagine, but by one author who coordinated the meter from front to back of the entire Pentateuch. So when you read this in the Hebrew and you read the translation, you're reading the original text. Thank you.